I am Elias. I speak to you from within, a mystery that cannot be dissected like an argument or weighed like a stone, but can be approached like a garden at dawn, slowly, with reverence, listening more than speaking. There is a question that lies at the edge of every believing heart and every wounded heart alike. Why did the one who walks upon the waves allow his eyes to fill with water? Why did the voice that called galaxies into being tremble with breath and grief until tears spilled onto dust? To understand this, we must not stand far away and observe from a safe distance. We must walk into that world and stand where he stood. Feel the air that pressed around him. Hear the sobbing that reached his ears. See what he saw when his human eyes looked upon human sorrow with the gaze of God. Come first to a small village on the slope of a hill, a place of stone paths and low houses crouched close together, where the sun is already high and the air is heavy with the mingled smells of dust, sweat, and the spices that cling to mourning clothes. This is Bethany, and on this day it is a village wrapped in grief. A man has died, not a stranger, not a distant figure, but a friend whose laughter once filled these courtyards, whose hands once helped build the very house where the mourners now sit. He has been dead for days. The professional wailers have cried themselves hoarse and grown quiet. The first shock of death has hardened into the weight of finality. He lies in a tomb cut into the rock, a hollow in the earth sealed by a round stone, a space that smells of linen and spices, pressed hurriedly around the body when the breath had barely left it. Outside that tomb, the earth is marked by footsteps and the pressed knees of those who have knelt there. You hear the whispers before you see him. He has come. He who could have come earlier, who healed the sick with a word, who touched eyes and gave them light, has at last arrived at a house where the bed is empty and the grave is full. There is a hush in the air that is not silence, but expectation and confusion woven together. He moves through the village with a slowness that belies the urgency of the moment, his steps unhurried, yet filled with purpose. Dust clings to his garments. The faces around him are wet with tears, eyes swollen and red. They look at him with a mix of hope, reproach, and bewilderment. If you had been here, some of them have said, this would not have happened. The sentence lies thick in the air even when lips no longer form it. He walks to the sisters who have lost their brother. Women, he knows. Women whose grief he feels not as a passing sympathy, but as a wound that cuts into his own heart. One of them comes to him first outside the village, words spilling from her like water from a broken jar. Words of faith and pain pressing against each other. The other cannot even bring herself to leave the house until she is summoned. She rises from the floor where she sat, surrounded by mourners, and falls at his feet, her sobs breaking open the silence. You can see their shoulders shaking, hear the raw sound that comes from the deep place where the soul cries as much as the throat. Around them stand friends and neighbors, some joining in the weeping, others standing stiffly, uncertain what to say or do. Their eyes flick to him again and again, as if measuring his response, as if hoping to read the will of God in the lines of his face. In that moment, he does not speak a command or proclaim a doctrine. He looks at the women he loves, at the averted faces of the onlookers, at the road that has been worn by their restless pacing these past days, at the tomb that waits ahead. He sees the weight of death pressing on this small village, as it presses on all villages, in all times. A weight that entered the world long before this man died, a weight that has wound itself around human life like a coil. He sees not only this grave, but every grave. Not only these tears, but all tears. The quiet sobbing of mothers in dark rooms, the clenched jaws of fathers who must bury their children, the wordless lament of friends parted forever. The grief of the world stands before him, concentrated and particular in these two women and that sealed tomb. And there is a stillness in him before the tears. a stillness like the moment before a storm breaks. Not of anger, but of a love so strong that it must make itself visible. He knows what he will do. That knowledge does not flicker in him like a new thought. It is the steady light of his mission. He has delayed his coming for reasons no one around him can grasp. He has allowed death to have its day here, has allowed the body to lie long enough that decay has already begun its slow work, precisely so that what he now does will stand as a clear sign that death is not absolute. Yet knowing that the resurrection of this man is only moments away does not harden his heart against the sorrow that envelops him. He does not stand aloof, like an actor who knows the script and therefore refuses to enter the emotion of the scene. Instead, he lets the agony of those around him move him in the depths of his humanity. The sacred account says simply that his spirit was deeply moved, that he groaned inwardly, that he asked where they had laid him. And then, as he approached the tomb, he wept. These are not the controlled tears of a man shedding a polite drop for the sake of appearances, not the quick moistening of eyes that comes and goes before others notice. These are tears that rise from the union of his human heart and the divine compassion that burns within it. There is a trembling of the lip, a tightening of the throat, a heat behind the eyes that cannot be held back. They spill down his cheeks, mixing with the dust. The people around him see this and whisper among themselves that he loved his friend. And they are right, but his love is larger than even they suspect. Why does he weep when he knows that in moments he will call the dead man out of the tomb? Because love does not skip over pain, even when it knows pain will end. Because the Father does not comfort from afar, but walks into the valley with those who pass through it. Because he is not only the master of death, but the companion of those who stand helpless before it. His tears are the revelation that God refuses to rescue without first sharing. At the tomb he will shout a name with authority that no grave can ignore. And the dead will stumble back into the light, shedding grave clothes like the remnants of a nightmare. But before that shout, there is this quiet, this trembling, this wetness on his face. His tears declare that what he is about to undo he truly hates. That death is not a neutral part of the order he created, but an enemy he has come to confront. In his weeping, heaven's rejection of death's reign is made visible. His tears protest the tragedy of a world where friendship ends at a stone door, and the voices at supper are one fewer than the night before. They say to every mourner, "I do not stand outside your pain calculating outcomes. I stand inside it with you, and I let it touch me until my eyes overflow." These tears are not a lapse of control. They are the deliberate opening of his heart to be seen. There is power in restraint here, as great as the power that will soon call Lazarus from the tomb. He could visit this place as a mere wonder worker, performing his sign with efficient detachment, leaving behind a village astonished but not healed in its deeper places. Instead, he allows his own soul to shudder with those he loves. He gives them not only a miracle, but a glimpse of the heart behind the miracle. In his tears, the invisible tenderness of God takes visible form. Walk now with me to another hill, another day. The air is different here, filled not with the closeness of a mourning village, but with the wide expanse of a city spread below. It is a busy season. Pilgrims crowd the roads, dust rising around their feet as they stream toward the gates. From this height you can see the walls of Jerusalem encircling its slopes, its temple gleaming with white stone and gold where the afternoon light catches it, smoke from sacrifices curling into the sky. The city seems strong, solid, unassailable to those who live within it. Its gates are thick, its towers rise firm, its priests and teachers move through its courts with an air of certainty. Yet the one who stands on this hill sees more than stone and ritual. He sees the invisible history woven through its streets, the blood of prophets soaked into its paving, the stubborn pride that has met every call to repentance with indifference or hostility. He senses in the air a hardness that no outward piety can disguise. He knows what this city will soon do with him, and what will befall it in the years that follow. Armies will encircle those walls. One day, hunger will stalk its alleys. Fire will lick its stones. Children will scream in streets that today echo with psalms. Yet, he does not gaze with the cold detachment of an accuser. He looks with the eyes of one who has loved this city long before its stones were laid, who has sent messengers to it over the centuries, only to see them mocked, imprisoned, slain. He has walked its streets himself, taught in its courts, healed its sick, confronted its leaders, wept over its blindness even before this moment. Now, from the height of the Mount of Olives, with the whole city lying like an open palm before him, that grief rises once again. He speaks words of lament, saying that if only it had known the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from its eyes. And as he says this, his voice thickens, his chest tightens. Tears fill his eyes. The city below is bustling, unaware that it is being wept over by the very one it claims to honor. He does not weep because his plan has been thwarted or his honor slighted. He weeps because love sees the ruin that rejection will bring, and grieves even while it respects the freedom of those who choose it. His tears fall for the children who will suffer consequences they did not choose, for the simple poor who will be crushed between imperial might and religious stubbornness, for the way sin's hardened path always leads to destruction. Here again, his tears are not weakness, but revelation. They reveal that judgment is not the pleasure of God, but his strange work heavy upon him. They show that when the Holy One warns of coming disaster, he does so with tears in his eyes, not satisfaction on his lips. He could look at this city and see only the stiff-necked pride of its leaders, the traps laid for him in debate, the plots brewing in dark corners. Yet he sees also the widow dropping her last coins into the temple treasury, the lame man lying at a gate, the child learning to read the sacred texts by flickering lamplight. He sees faces and names in the sea of roofs, and his heart is moved. His tears here are the tears of a rejected lover who will still walk into the city, knowing it will cast him out. The tears of a shepherd who sees wolves circling and cannot force his sheep to stay beside him. In both Bethany and on this hill overlooking Jerusalem, the weeping of Christ is a window into a union deeper than we can fathom. In him, humanity and divinity are not mixed or confused, nor separated as if sharing space. They are united in a single person, so that every human gesture is the gesture of God in human form. When his stomach growls with hunger, when his muscles ache with fatigue, when dust sticks to the sweat on his skin, this is not a divine actor pretending to be human. It is God truly experiencing the conditions into which humanity has fallen without sin, but with every consequence of a fallen world pressed against him. So when he weeps, the water that gleams on his cheeks is human, drawn from tear ducts like ours, triggered by the same complex interaction of emotion, bodily reaction, and will. Yet those tears are also divine, because the person who weeps is the eternal Son made flesh. They are the human way in which the grief of God over his lost children becomes visible in history. In Lazarus's village, those tears fall into dust that has been soaked with the tears of countless generations. In Jerusalem's twilight, they glisten briefly before slipping down into the folds of his garment. But their origin is the unfathomable compassion of the Father, the burning love of the Spirit, the mystery of a God who is not distant from pain. They show us that the heart of God is not an unmoved stone throne far above the changing weather of our sorrows. They show us that when humanity cries out in anguish, there is one who has let that anguish pierce into his own being so deeply that it has reached the very center of God. It is tempting to see tears as loss of control, as if the one who weeps is at the mercy of feeling, overwhelmed and no longer fully commanding himself. We often imagine strength as dry-eyed, stoic, composed, Yet in Christ we see a different vision of authority. He is never out of control. Even when his tears fall freely, he chooses to let grief move through him, to allow the full weight of love's sorrow to register in his body. He does not clamp down on his humanity like a lid, nor does he let it run wild like a storm. Instead, he opens it like a window to the will of the Father. His tears are ordered by love, not by panic. They come not because he despairs of the outcome, but because he honors the depth of the present sorrow. When he stands at the tomb, he knows that death's apparent triumph is only moments from being shattered. Yet he does not rush past mourning as if grief were a trivial prelude to victory. In his perspective, grief matters precisely because life is precious and death is an intrusion. To brush it aside quickly would be to treat human love lightly. So he lets himself feel the full sting of what sin and death have done, even as he prepares to reverse it in this one man, as a sign of what he will one day do for all. His authority is not diminished by his tears, it is made more profound. For here we see a Lord who can conquer not only by decree but by entering into the battle alongside those he saves. When he weeps over Jerusalem, his tears do not change the city's course in that moment. He will still walk into its streets and teach, still be handed over, still suffer, still die. The city's leaders will still harden their hearts. The future destruction he foresees will not be averted by his grief. Yet his weeping is not futile. It testifies that judgment is never divorced from mercy in the heart of God. Even when the consequences of rejection unfold, they unfold under the gaze of one who has already mourned them, already suffered them in anticipation. His tears are a silent promise that whatever wrath falls upon sin, it falls on one who has borne its full weight in his own body. In this sense, his weeping is prophetic. It points forward to the cross, where the sorrow of God over sin and the justice of God against sin will meet in one place and one hour. If we dare to ask what these tears reveal about the heart of God, we must be ready to abandon any image of God as untouched by our story. The one whose image shines in these luminous eyes is not content to watch humanity's tragedy from a safe distance. He has written himself into the script, not as a brief guest appearance, but as the central figure who carries the plot to its resolution at great cost to himself. His tears show us that divine love is not simply a benevolent will wishing our good from afar, but a capacity to be affected by our pain, to take it into himself. When you stand beside Christ at the tomb, when you watch him looking over Jerusalem, you see that God does not love abstractions. He loves this man in the grave, with his particular laugh and smile, his particular friendships. He loves this city with its particular streets and families and stories. His sorrow is not for a generic humanity, but for specific lives. He knows the names carved on every stone, the thoughts hidden in every heart, and he cares enough to let loss for each of them weigh upon him. It is here that the question arises with a sharp edge. If he loves so deeply, why does he allow sorrow to remain? Why does he stand weeping rather than erasing grief in an instant from the world? Why does he ask where Lazarus has been laid? Let 4 days pass, let decay begin, instead of arriving in time to prevent the funeral. Why does he foresee Jerusalem's doom and still allow its people to choose their path? The answer is not simple, but his tears themselves are part of it. God allows sorrow not because he delights in it, but because the world he has made is not a theater of puppets. It is a place where love must be chosen, where trust must be real, where the consequences of refusal must be allowed to unfold enough for their reality to be felt. If he were to bulldoze over every grief by sheer force, never permitting the weight of sin and death to be seen, the healing he brings would never be understood for what it is. Redemption would be taken for granted, like air, unnoticed and unappreciated. Instead, he allows us to feel the cost of our separation, the pain of our mortality, so that when he steps into that pain, when he carries that mortality and transforms it, we can see the depth of what he has done. In Bethany, the delay that caused such anguish is what allows his act of raising Lazarus to shine as a beacon, pointing to the resurrection beyond. In Jerusalem, the tears before judgment lay bare, the compassion behind both his warnings and his endurance of the cross that follows. Sorrow also becomes the place where communion with him is most intimate. If God had chosen to bar himself from suffering, we could only ever meet him at the surface of life, in moments of ease and comfort. But because he has chosen to let grief pierce him, we find that our deepest wounds are the very places where his presence can be most profoundly felt. Standing beside the grave, Mary and Martha would never again be able to say that God does not understand their pain. They have seen him standing with them, eyes wet, chest heaving, before he called their brother forth. The people of Jerusalem, if they remembered, could never truly believe that the God who judges their sin is indifferent to their fate. They have been wept over by the one who warns them. When we now bring our own tears before him, we find that we are not speaking into a void. We are placing our grief into hands that have themselves trembled with human sorrow. The one who listens has already cried. His response is not theoretical but experiential. Tears, then, are not merely a symptom of human frailty. In Christ, they are elevated into a language of revelation. They speak of the seriousness of sin's devastation, of the preciousness of each life, of the patience of divine mercy, of the cost of our redemption. They show us that weakness in the world's eyes can hide the deepest strength. The one who could remain untouched chooses vulnerability. The one who could stride from victory to victory chooses to pause at graves, to linger in lament. He does this not simply to comfort us, but to dignify our own mourning, to teach us that we too must not skip lightly over the pain of others. If God in flesh has taken time to weep, how can we treat grief as an inconvenience to be swiftly covered over? His example calls us to be present with those who suffer, not only offering solutions but sharing tears. At the same time, his weeping rescues tears from despair. He does not collapse under sorrow. He moves through it. At the tomb, his tears are not the end of the story, but the prelude to a command that shakes death. Over the city, his lament is not the final word, but a station on the path that will lead to the cross and beyond it to an empty grave. In his life, sorrow and hope are never separated. They interpenetrate. His tears themselves carry within them the seed of resurrection, because the one who cries is the resurrection and the life. To gaze at the weeping Christ is to see that God allows sorrow, but never abandons it to itself. He enters it, fills it, and from within it brings forth new life. In this long and gentle revelation, we learn that divine power does not always appear as immediate rescue. Sometimes it appears as the strength to stand in the darkness with us until a new dawn comes. Sometimes it appears as the freedom he gives us to choose, even when he knows that our choices will break his heart and our own. Sometimes it appears as the quiet endurance with which he carries our pain on his shoulders, weeping beside us until the hour comes when he will wipe away every tear. Until that final wiping, his own tears remain written in the gospel as a pledge. They tell us that no sorrow is beneath his notice, no grief too small to enter into the vast compassion of God. They tell us that weakness is not despised in heaven. It is the place where his strength rests. They tell us that when we stand at our own tombs, literal or hidden within the heart, looking at losses we cannot reverse, there is one who has stood in that place, whose tears have sanctified it, whose voice can still speak life into what seems irretrievably gone. And they tell us that judgment, when it comes, is never the act of a distant tyrant, but the last tragic expression of a love that has been refused again and again, a love that first chose to weep over the ruin it foresees. Consider how those tears stretch like a bridge across the whole story of humanity. At the beginning, in a garden not yet touched by death, there is no weeping. The evenings are filled with the quiet joy of unbroken communion. When the first disobedience cracks that communion, when fear and shame enter, there is no mention yet of God's tears, but they hover in the space between the lines, implied in the sorrowful questions, in the searching call that echoes among the trees. From that moment onward, the earth begins to hear the sound of crying. A brother kills his brother, and his blood cries from the ground. Mothers cry over cradles that no longer hold living warmth. Cities fall, towers crumble, generations pass under the shadow of death. The whole history of humanity becomes soaked in tears. When at last the Son steps into this history, he does not remain untouched. He walks through a world already damp with grief and allows its moisture to reach his own eyes. His tears are the answer to every accusation that God has remained aloof while men and women have suffered. They are the place where the long silence of heaven is broken, not only by thunderous proclamations, but by the gentle sound of God's own breathing catching in his throat. In the Garden of Agony, where he contemplates the cup he must drink, his sorrow reaches a new depth. Even there, though the sacred accounts speak more of sweat like drops of blood than of tears, the same movement of the heart is present. He faces not only the pain of crucifixion, but the weight of all sin, the loneliness of bearing what is not his own. The anguish that wrings his soul is of a piece with the tears of Bethany and of the Mount of Olives. It is the cost of love that will not turn away. When we say that his tears reveal the heart of God, we must understand that this heart is not divided against itself. It is not that the Father is cold and the Son tender, as if one must persuade the other to show mercy. The tears of the Son are the outpouring of the same love that moves the Father and burns in the Spirit. They show us in bodily form the eternal compassion that has always been present in God, now expressed in a way we can see, in features we can imagine, in eyes that might have met ours had we stood on those roads and hills. There is a quiet authority in those tears that tells us they are not merely personal emotion. They carry a message for us. They say that grief is not the opposite of faith, that sorrow is not the denial of trust. When he stood at the tomb and wept, he did not doubt his Father. When he gazed on Jerusalem and cried, he did not cease to uphold the world. In him, perfect trust and honest anguish coexist. This is a liberation for every heart that has been tempted to conceal its pain before God, afraid that tears would displease him. If Christ himself has wept, then our own tears can be brought into prayer without shame. We do not need to dry our eyes before approaching the altar of the Holy One. We can come as we are, wet-faced and trembling, knowing that the one who meets us there has himself known such trembling. It is also a rebuke to every notion that Christian life should be an unbroken line of victorious smiles. His path passed through graveyards and lamentations. His glory did not bypass the valley of shadows, but transfigured it from within. When we walk through that valley, our calling is not to pretend that it is bright, but to cling to the hand of the one who has already walked it, leaving the imprint of his wet footsteps on its floor. That hand is gentle because it is pierced. Those eyes that look on us in our own weeping remember the sting of their own tears. In the raising of Lazarus, there is a moment when Jesus commands that the stone be taken away. The protest rises that the smell will be terrible, that decay has already advanced. Death is not only a sadness, it is something that offends the senses, that reveals the corruption of what was meant to be whole. He does not flinch. He orders the stone gone, exposing the depth of the loss in order to transform it. His tears have already gone before this act, softening the hearts of those who watch. When the dead man comes out, stumbling into the light, this is not merely a display of power. It is the flowering, of a compassion that has already shared the pain of the mourners. If you look closely, you can see that the tears were themselves part of the miracle. They prepared the soil of trust in which the seed of resurrection could be planted. They assured the grieving sisters that the one who calls their brother out is not indifferent to what he calls him from. Something similar happens when he laments over Jerusalem. His words of warning carry more weight because they come from eyes that have shown their sorrow. Prophecy from a dry heart can sound like condemnation. On his lips, it is a plea, an invitation, and even when it is refused, it remains an expression of love. His tears saturate his words with meaning. They show that the Holy One takes no satisfaction in disaster. The ruin that will come is not the whim of a cruel deity. It is the bitter fruit of choices made against the grain of love. Yet even as he foresees it, he stands not as an executioner, but as a grieving friend. The same pattern repeats itself in countless hidden ways in our own lives. There are moments when the consequences of what we have chosen loom before us like the future of that city. We stand on our own hills, looking back at paths taken, feeling the weight of what is set in motion. In those moments, we may imagine God as only angry or only distant. His grief over our self-destruction is not a theatrical display. It is the measure of his attachment to us. He will not force our freedom, but he will never cease to care what becomes of us. Sometimes, in the mystery of his providence, he allows us to taste the sorrow our choices have brewed, not to crush us, but to awaken us. And always, even then, he stands ready to enter that sorrow with us, to share our tears, to lead us through repentance into a new place. The question of why God allows sorrow before redemption bows before the larger mystery that he has chosen to share that sorrow fully. In the end, we are not asked to solve the problem of pain, but to look at the face of the suffering God and let that face reframe the question. When you contemplate those tears long enough, you might begin to sense that they are not only reactions but also seeds. Every tear Christ sheds falls into the soil of the world as a hidden promise. It says that this grief will not be the final word, that this sorrow will one day be remembered, not as a pointless agony, but as a place where love was most deeply present. His tears at Lazarus's tomb point toward a day when all tombs will be emptied, when decay will have no more power. His tears over Jerusalem point toward a new city, one that descends from above, where there is no death, no mourning, no crying, no pain. In that city, the memory of his weeping will be part of the joy, because those who dwell there will know that their happiness was bought at the price of a heart that chose to suffer with them and for them. Until that day, the church lives under the sign of these tears. It is called to be a community that both weeps and hopes. In every age, there are Lazaruses whose deaths seem too early, too unjust, too senseless. There are Jerusalems bent on destroying themselves, deaf to warnings, rushing toward ruin. The followers of Christ are not permitted to retreat into indifference. They are asked to stand where he stood, to let their own eyes be opened to suffering, to be moved in their depths, to lament before they act. Only then will their works of mercy and their words of truth carry the same flavor as his. It is easy to announce resurrection without having sat in the dust with the bereaved. It is easy to denounce sin without having wept over the sinner. But the way of the Master is different. He calls his disciples to a tenderness that does not dilute the truth, and to a truth that never hardens against tenderness. His tears show the intersection of the two. They teach his followers that strong faith can cry, that brave love can break down in sobs, that holiness can have a wet face. If you listen closely, you might even hear that his tears have a sound. At Bethany, they sound like the soft, choking breaths that escape between words of comfort. the brief silence that falls when his voice fails for a moment. On the Mount of Olives, they sound like pauses in the lament, spaces where his gaze rests on some particular rooftop, some particular courtyard, imagining the cries that will one day rise from there. These sounds are quiet, but they are full of weight. They carry the density of eternity bending down into time. When you pray, you can let that sound shape your own words. You can bring to him the names of those you love, the cities you belong to, the wounds you carry, and imagine them placed gently into the same heart that has already been pierced. You can entrust to him the graves you have stood beside, the futures you fear, the ruins you see in yourself and the world. His tears guarantee that what you entrust to him will be held not only with power but with tenderness. At the center of this mystery stands a cross. Wooden beams planted in the earth, a human body nailed to them, blood running, muscles straining, lungs gasping for air. The tears of Christ lead there as rivers lead to the sea. At the cross, the sorrow he showed in Bethany and over Jerusalem reaches its full expression. Here he does not only share the grief of others, he bears the grief of all. When he cries out, he gathers into his voice every lament ever uttered. The tears that once fell quietly now are joined to sweat and blood, to the dark abandonment that crushes him. Yet even here, love is not defeated. It is working at its deepest level, opening a path through death itself. When he breathes his last, the world holds its breath. Some graves are opened. The veil in the temple tears. The earth shakes. The tears he wept now have their answer in his pierced side, from which flow water and blood, washing, cleansing, giving life. When he rises, tears will come again, but of another kind, the joyful tears of those who see him alive, who touch wounds that no longer bleed. Between the tears of Bethany, the tears over Jerusalem, and the joy of the resurrection, a tapestry is woven that reveals the whole pattern of God's dealing with humanity. Sorrow, compassion, judgment, mercy, death, life, all held within the arms of a love that never lets go. When you feel your own eyes fill, remember that you are not alone in this. Remember that somewhere in the hidden depths of eternity, there is a memory of a man standing before a tomb, another standing above a city, and in both scenes his cheeks are wet. Remember that the universe is not indifferent to your tears. It has already seen God's tears fall into its dust. And remember that the last promise spoken is that he will wipe away every tear from every eye. The hand that will do that is the same hand that once brushed his own tears aside so that he could go on to the cross. The tenderness with which he will touch your face is the tenderness he showed at Lazarus's tomb. The sorrow he will erase is the sorrow he has already known. I tell you this so that when you think of Christ, you will not only imagine him enthroned in glory or striding in power, but also standing still in front of a grave, shoulders slightly bent, eyes shining with unfallen tears. In that image, you find the secret of why his tears are not weakness, but strength. Not defeat, but revelation. They reveal that the heart at the center of all things is not made of stone, but of living love, capable of grief, committed to joy, willing to descend into our darkness, until even our tears become, in his presence, the first drops of a coming ocean of consolation.